Okay.
Oh, you do have hair. For some reason, I thought you were bald.
I'm getting there, but no, I'm
Me
not
too.
yet. Hey guys, Rafi here from the Endgame Investor, and I've got Phil in the line for our monthly stint for the monthly Bitter Endgame draft. And Phil has gone from leaps and bounds this week with his first appearance on Liberty and Finance, which I would have to say is partly thanks to me because Dunnigan had mentioned me in finding Phil. And if you found Phil through me, then I have fulfilled my duty are one of them. I mean, the duties keep coming. It's a very dutiful job I have to do. And check
You
out,
said duty.
yeah, we'll put the link in the description below to Phil's interview on Liberty and Finance. I think it went fantastically, swimmingly. And Phil, we're going to talk about, just so we have the topics up front, we're going to talk about the tale of the disembodied dinar. It's a ghost story involving currencies. Phil's going to whisper sweet nothings about dead currencies and how they pretend to be alive when they're not, and how they can eat your brain if you let them. And second, we're going to talk about
The unknowability of the end game.
yes, the unknowability of the end game, not in terms of empirical or empiricism, but the inherent unknowable nature of the timing of the end game. And this has to do with quantum reality and knowing your own day of death and knowing what you're going to be doing for a living. Because if you knew any of these things, nobody would make a living and nobody would ever live. Imagine if you knew the day you were going to die, you wouldn't do anything for your life because you need the unknowability. That's the point of it.
Yeah,
Anyway.
gotta keep hope
Um,
alive.
yes, and also, why is it that that sound money circles attract weird thought processes like flat Earth or concave Earth or QAnon or whatever these weird things are? We get lumped in with truly wacky conspiracy types of thought, which I'm not against those. You can think whatever you want, and I'm willing to talk with them, but why does it keep popping up? And finally, there was one more thing, was there?
Oh, I was just gonna mention I moved my 401k. I'll talk about that
All
on
right,
when I
yes. Go.
myself. Okay.
Phil, tell us how you're doing and tell us about your 401k story.
I'm doing great. You may notice there is a tent in the background behind me. I spent the night in sub-zero temperatures.
Here is Sub-Zero! Now, Plane Zero!
Doing backyard camping with my son, who thought it would be great fun, and it was. It was just very cold, but I have winter rated bags, so as long as I stayed in the bag, I was fine. But during the course of the evening, your elbow rolls out of the bag or whatever, and then you wake up and you have to get back in. So that part was a little chilly, but it was great fun. And for whatever reason, kids have a wonderful time sleeping anywhere except their own beds.
Some kids are
Anyway,
the opposite, but maybe your kid is special.
yeah. Oh, really? That doesn't happen with you?
My kids can sleep anywhere.
Oh, they just sleep
Some
absolutely
kids can
anywhere. Okay.
only sleep in their bed and they're terrified of sleepovers. That happens also.
Really? Okay. No, mine is like the last place he wants to sleep is his own bed.
There's worse things.
So I've as people on the channel may be aware if you've seen our previous episodes, I've been complaining for I think almost 2 years now that I had money stuck in a 401k that I couldn't get out because I am under 55 and I can't the only way to move it would be to change jobs. And I have a semi job. I don't want to get too much in my personal life because it's the internet, but I have semi moved jobs and I have access to my 401k. And the only downside is the IRS is not happy with the move.
You cannot declare offshore investment losses against future capital gains. Any child knows that.
The way I'm structuring this, the IRS wants a decent cut of that. But I was sitting here thinking, and I was like, there's a decent chance we'll be in really high inflation because I don't owe this for another year. This is going to hit in January, and then it's going to be a part of the 2026's income tax stuff. So I was like, there's a decent chance I might dodge this bullet completely. So I've placed a considerable bet that the end game is going to happen in 2025. Now, if it doesn't happen, I will be annoyed, but I actually have the money to pay it off all right now. I'm just holding what I need to pay the IRS until 2026 in the hopes that it hyperinflates and I can pay it off with a stick of chewing gum. But I would never advise anybody to ever, ever, ever put themselves in a situation where they need the currency to hyperinflate to get away from some sort of debt obligations. So, but I have placed personally for myself, in knowing everything I know, I have placed a considerable bet that hyperinflation is going to happen this coming year.
All right. Well, we wish you luck on that bet, and I hope you're right because I would like to move on with my life, and I don't know what the next stage is going to be. Um, but I hope it's going to be fun. I mean, things are falling apart all around me. Another country just evaporated to the north of me. Syria is in complete
Yes.
chaos now. You don't even know if Assad's alive, and what happens now. I don't know. I just hopefully they stay out of here. And
What do Israelis think of Assad? Because he was in some ways keeping the sort of the more militant jihadists from taking over,
I
but
don't know what
he wasn't a great
Israelis
friend
think
either.
in general. I don't know what Israelis think in general about Assad.
That's true.
But what I think,
Everyone's different. Yeah.
what I think about him is he's a poor Nebuch guy. Like I feel sorry for the guy because it's clear he never was really designed for any of this. He was kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. He wanted to be an optometrist. That's his
Yeah.
profession, and he really like he seemed like aside from the situation he was forced into, he seems like a nice guy.
Yeah.
Um, but he was caught with Iran on one side of him and the United States on another side of him, and not really able to move much. And he had to allow Iranian weapons through his territory to get to Hezbollah so they could mess with us over here. And the thing is, we ended up fighting back, and then Hezbollah sent their soldiers over to Lebanon, and they were his backers, so there was no one to protect him. So he got overthrown. His backers took a risk attacking us, and he paid for it, and there was really nothing he can do because you can't really say no to Iran and you can't say no to the United States. So what's the guy going to do? And now he's probably dead.
Is he
What might
dead?
he might his plane took off from, was it Damascus maybe? And then
Yeah.
they lost radar contact. Could be he turned it off. Could be like he's like running away to Moscow. I don't know. Or it could be you could be shot down and dead for all I don't know.
Wow. I had no idea. I've been camping in the backyard. I've been unaware of such things. Holy moly.
Anyway, let's talk about
Sure. Dinar,
ghost money,
disembodied
zombie,
dinar.
zombie money. There's this case of the disembodied Swiss dinar, and Phil, you'll tell us the story. It's a spooky zombie ghost story of money, and we want dim the lights and light the candles, and
Set the pentagram on the ground.
here you go.
Yeah, so you actually set me onto this story with your in-game investor on Substack, which is a great read, and I recommend everyone subscribe to it. You talked about the disembodied dinar, and you were in a debate with a gentleman in Israel, I believe,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he brought it up, and I guess you'd never heard of it before, so you were left, you were caught
Yeah, yeah.
flat-footed at the time.
He's a physics professor, believes in Bitcoin. Brought up the case of the disembodied dinar, which is basically a currency that is completely disconnected from any central bank, and yet it was still circulating as a money. And he's like, "Well, if that can happen, Bitcoin can be money." I'm like, "Okay, I don't think that's true, but you got me because I don't know this case and I have to look into it," which is what I did.
So and I looked into it as well. So let me tell the story of it. So in 1993, after the first Gulf War, Saddam Hussein was sort of cut off from all international markets. That they were trying to choke him out, and choke the country out. And so one of the ways he started to, I guess, pay off the debt that the government was accruing was by issuing this new Saddam dinar. He could no longer print notes of the old dinar because I think the presses were physically not in Iraq. They were like in London or something. And London was not about to, print any more notes. So I think it was China. I think he got China to make some new presses with some new money with his face on it. So the old ones didn't have his face on it. They had some like galloping horses. And the new ones have his
Oh,
face on it.
Chinese, look, I need some currency. Please print me some Chinese currency. Wow, okay.
Yeah. The Chinese notes with his, and it was apparently it's very poor quality. Even the paper was like really poor quality, but he didn't care because he was print. I mean, he was just, money printer go burr because he was just trying to hype, he was just trying to pay it off with fake money anyway. Um, so the new currency became known as the Saddam dinar because his face was on it, and the old currency was called the Swiss dinar. It's a little confusing as to why it was called the Swiss dinar, but I guess people thought that the plates were in Switzerland, but I think they were actually in London. But anyway, it was called the Swiss dinar. So the central bank of Iraq completely disowned the Swiss dinar. They said we do not support this. Our reserves have no affiliation with this currency at all. These are now worthless scraps of paper. The only thing we are attached to is the Saddam dinar. And everyone would think normally that would make a currency instantly worthless overnight. However, in the northern regions of Iraq and the Kurdish breakaway provinces, they refused to use the Saddam dinar and they said, we will still use the Swiss dinar. And so your friend and others, there are no if you read about this online, you will find many notes saying this is proof positive that money can be a point system and that it doesn't have to be attached to anything at all as long as the people using it agree that it is, the money. That is so digging in. I said logically, before I did anything else, I literally sat in this chair and I said, logically, what is happening here? I channeled, the ghosts of Mises and Rothbard, said, what would they say is happening at this moment in time?
Positivist forefathers of deductive logic.
Right. So what would I do? How would I approach this from that school of thought? And I said, okay, so what money has, the currency, I should say currency has paper currency has two factors to it. It can be converted into its underlying assets, or theoretically, not these days, but theoretically, it should be able to be converted to its underlying assets. So you should be able to show up and get gold for your dollar, for example. The other thing it's used for is debt. So if you cut off the convertibility, which is what the dollar is not convertible to the underlying asset. The only thing it's relying on is debt as well. If you cut off if the central bank cuts off the currency from the old currency from the new currency and just says these are, there's no exchangeability, there's no official exchangeability, these are unrelated notes. The people still have debts in that old currency. So when let's say I bought a car and I took out a loan and I bought a car in Mosul, and then the next day this dinar thing happened. I still owe the mortgage in those old Swiss dinars, and there's no convertibility. The two are unattached. So there's no exchange rate. There's no official exchange rate. There is an unofficial exchange rate, and I think it started like 2-1, and it went 300-1 Saddam dinars to Swiss dinars.
The Swiss dinars actually gained in purchasing power despite being disembodied from any central bank.
Well, so they gained they strengthened against the Saddam dinar. I'm going to get into the increase in purchasing power. I'm suspicious of that.
Okay.
So logically, this is what I think would happen. So I was thinking, okay, so if this is all debt based, if there's no convertibility in anything, it's all just debt is the only thing keeping this going. So it's like every other currency Ponzi scheme. The debt must grow at an exponential rate, but in all other cases, in the U.S. case, in the British case, in the Saddam dinar case, the debt and the currency are going up in tandem, right? Because you need to keep the deflationary crashes from happening. You need to keep the currency going up with the debt, and it can never be enough. If the currency ever gets ahead of the debt, you have a hyperinflation because all the debts can be satisfied very quickly.
And if the debt gets in front of the currency, then you have a deflationary crash.
Right. So if the debt gets too far high, you have a crash. You have a crash of both, and if it gets too high, you have a hyperinflation. So I said, okay. So if the Swiss dinar is locked, there can be no more Swiss dinars. England has the presses; they're not printing them. So the the currency supply is stuck here, but the debt must grow at an exponential rate, Rafi. That's how these things work. So what would I expect to see? I would expect to see deflationary crashes. And then I started looking, and lo and behold, what were the articles talking about? They didn't say the Iraqis in northern Iraq were having a wonderful time. This currency was absolutely perfect. No, they said they were annoyed by the deflation. Like it was a problem. It was a real problem. And I think deflation. So you and I like to think there's a cathartic purge. either a deflationary crash or hyperinflationary crash, and then we move on to the next currency. But if you look back to 1929 with the dollar, the crash in 1929 was a deflationary crash, and then by 1932 we were still deflating. Like 3 years later, there were still these deflationary pulses. So I think deflations happen in pulses, and they probably get worse and worse and worse. So I'm thinking, but of that 11 years of the currency, the credit builds up and then crashes, and then it builds up to a smaller level, crashes harder,
Again,
builds up to a
right?
small level, crashes even harder,
Yeah,
until
you can
people are
see
just
that in the
done.
stair stepping of the stock prices from 1929 to 1932. Yeah.
Okay, okay, good. Yeah, there's some empirical evidence. This is just what I was expecting to see in my mind. So I
Also, you
think
should be
by
able to
the
see it through the bankruptcies of the banks involved or the
yeah.
things that are falling, right?
So by the end, I would expect these people just be desperate to get rid of this thing. They're like, we can't form any sort of credit. No credit can be accumulated at all. The notes are valuable. Now in some ways it's better than a hyperinflating currency, because you can actually store value. You can hold those notes and store value, and they don't turn into sand in your hands.
Yeah, it
But
gives the division of labor denominator in that country a stay of execution until you can hopefully have time to organize something more stable that, isn't destined for deflationary nothingness.
right.
Right. And
So, but
before you go on, I just
okay.
wanted to describe just in a single instance. That's not a good way to put it, but just to describe what the debt is actually doing, right? So you have the time when the currency is a central bank currency, which typically means there's some amount of real assets like gold, silver, whatever they have, plus a whole bunch of debt on top of it. And then that is an ostensibly functional currency. Then you have time, let's say X, where the central bank disowns the currency and then it becomes disembodied. Then you have time X plus one, where you have this now disembodied currency that is now circulating. And what there needs to be some kind of a bridge between X plus one crossing over to the X where that disownership happened back into the past when there was a central bank. But that's what debt is. It's a time bridge, right? Because you're saying if somebody owed somebody else, if Reuven owed Shimon like 20,000 Swiss dinars from before the bank disowned the currency, then he's bridging the present into the time when the central bank was still in charge, right? It's
Yes,
a time
absolutely.
bridge. That's what it is.
They,
So
yeah,
that's why when there's no more debt, when all the debt either defaults or paid off, the currency must die with it, whether it's because of defaults or because they printed so much money that all the debt is paid off and nobody cares about any more debt because the currency is so valueless that who cares about debt anymore? Either way, it dies.
yeah, the Kurds could not. It's not physically possible for the Kurds to have made a new Kurd currency. They could not, without backing it with something, right? They couldn't have said, we're going to make a new paper currency. It's going to have the same horses as the Swiss dinar, but it has no relation to the Swiss dinar. It has no relation to anything in the past as this new paper. That would never have flown, because then there's no connection to the past. You lose that Misesian monetary regression. You lose all that, and you're trying to pass off, totally worthless paper with no debt on top of it. That won't happen. The debt had to exist prior to the closing of the central bank to keep this thing going as long as it did. Well, there was speculation that the Kurds were saying, well, maybe we'll break away and form Kurdistan, and then we will start a central bank, and we will honor these notes. So there was
Oh,
some
they tried
speculation.
that then.
Yeah, well, they were saying they were going to. They never formed a
Okay.
Kurdistan or had a central bank. But what
Okay.
so there was a speculation impulse as well. It wasn't just debt. There was also speculation that these currency notes will reattach to a central bank, and therefore they will have value at the end as well. And they actually did. After the invasion, the coalition formed a new central bank, and they offered exchange rates to both the Saddam dinar and the Swiss dinar at different levels to allow them to convert into the new coalition dinar. And here's the evidence that they didn't like the Swiss dinar, because they were happy to take the coalition dinar. Right? If your friend was right and they had this magic currency that was disembodied from everything, and everyone was singing, they were sitting around the campfires in Mosul singing "Kumbaya."
Kumbaya, kumbaya, my lord, kumbaya, oh Lord, kumbaya.
They have discovered magic money. They would, no, we don't want the, well, we have perfect money right here. We don't need this coalition dinar because you're going to print more. You're going to print more of this coalition dinar. We don't want a part of that, right?
Right.
But no, they did not like the Swiss dinar. They were having a lot of trouble with it. So now the empirically, this part of the problem is a lot of this was very hard to measure. So you read these new, I read the news articles and it said the prices remain stable in the Swiss dinar. Well, how do they know that? Did they send a census taker to the boondocks of Iraq? Well, and this is the war-torn areas, right? This is the areas where Saddam gassed his people a few years ago, and they're in a simmering state of rage against the ruling government. So did someone send a census taker to go different stores and say, what's your pricing? What's your price? No. What they did was, I think what they did at the border areas were because at the border areas, people were probably taking both. You could probably take both the Saddam dinar and the Swiss dinar. And they could see the Saddam dinar, which was hyperinflating, they could see the prices exploding. And the Swiss dinar, even if it went up a little bit, and maybe it did, maybe it didn't, I don't know. It looks, I mean, compared to a hyperinflated currency, it looks, like a rock solid stability.
Yeah, but first of
So
all, Phil, there's also the challenge that even if prices were going down in the Swiss dinar, if that's because of deflation, that means that fewer and fewer people have any Swiss dinars, or they have
yeah.
less and less, and their incomes are going down. So if their incomes are like plummeting and nobody has any, if prices are going down, it doesn't matter because nobody can afford to buy anything anyway.
Yes, that's true. So that's another way of looking at it as well. So it's no guarantee that they were just prospering and everything was great up there. The main thing they were using to test was the exchange rate, and the exchange rate did explode. It started two Saddam dinars to one Swiss dinar, and ended up 300 to one.
Right.
But the new coalition formed. They moved on, and the Swiss dinar, ended up in the dustbin of history. So it is not proof positive that we are wrong in our show, and we're a couple of cranks, and Austrian school can go soak their head. No, none
Mhm.
of that's true.
Can you get a Swiss dinar on eBay? Like that would
Probably. Hmm.
I'd like to get one. I want a disembodied currency.
There you go.
I
Yeah,
can
try
I
it
can
out.
spook my kids with it. Like the next topic, I'm gonna share a screen here.
Okay.
And
The
so
unknowability of the timing of the end game.
yes, yes. So Phil, I'm gonna have you read from Midrash Rabbah. In English, you don't have to read the
Okay.
Aramaic. We're talking about Kurdistan. Actually, Ivan Bayuki of Wall Street Silver YouTube channel, he's
Yeah.
actually Kurdish, so he knows some Aramaic. So we had a little bit of an Aramaic chat. Um, so this is a source translated from the Aramaic Hebrew mix, right? And it's quoting Isaac, and he's old and he doesn't know when he's going to die, so he calls in his son to bless him before he dies. Genesis 27:2. Behold, I have now grown old. I do not know the day of my death. Phil, take it away.
It is taught there are seven matters that are obscured from people: the day of their death, the day of consolation, the profundity of justice. A person does not know through what he will profit. A person does not know what is in the heart of another. A person does not know what the woman is carrying in her pregnancy, and when the evil empire will fall.
Okay, so
The
the rest
day,
the rest is
okay.
proofs. The rest is proofs from verses that these are the seven things, and there's seven hints throughout the Bible that these are the seven unknowable things. So if you look through this list of things that are inherently unknowable, it's not a matter of empiricism. It's not like God had like a whole bunch of options as to what he was going to obscure from us. And he picked these seven things, and that's what they are, and that's just the nature of the world. And he could have picked any seven things, and that would have that's not the point. The point is that all these seven things are inherently unknowable. Because if you think about what happens if you know these things, then what happens to the future, right? So if you think of the day of your death, if you know the day of your death, if you know when you're going to die, your life is going to be a mess, right? You're going to say, "Oh, I'm dying on this day, so why do I have to go out to work today? Why do I have to go spend time with my kids? Why do I even have to have kids, have a wife? What's the point? Like, I'm gonna die on day X." So like, it saps your will to go on, right? We have to not know this day in order to live, right? The profundity of justice, that means nobody knows how much justice is going to be served in this world. Like we don't know if we take a case to court, We don't know if the judge is going to agree with us. We don't know if justice is going to be served. But if we did know, right, if we knew that a certain court system was just completely corrupted and there's no chance of anything, and we knew this for certain, then the justice system cannot function, right? You cannot know exactly how much justice is going to be served in the right way in a justice system, and justice cannot be perfect. The third one is, in that case, society would break down, right? If the third one is a person does not, oh yeah, this is the economic one. A person does not know through what he will profit. A person doesn't know what exactly to do for a living. If you knew what the most profitable thing was, then you have the Rothbardian problem of everyone, the evenly rotating economy, which is impossible. Prices and goods and services never change prices, and everybody knows everything in economic certainty. What makes an economy is the uncertainty of it, right? If you have any certainty as to what you should do for a living, nobody can function, society falls apart. All these things, society falls apart. So when it comes to the end game, right, that's just a corollary of economic unknowability, right? And if you want to extend it to what's in the womb of a woman, it doesn't mean boy or girl, it doesn't mean gender. It means like who is the person? What is this
Yeah.
person that's growing inside her? Is he going to be good? Is he going to be bad? Is he going to be productive? Is he going to be a bum? Nobody knows. You can't know because if you knew, nobody would reproduce. Right? So these are all by nature unknowable. The end game must by nature be unknowable because if everybody knew when the dollar was going to die, the dollar would die right now. Right? It's the non-knowability of it that keeps it functioning. Eventually, it will end. But if we knew when that was, it would already happen. It's an internal paradox, right? So that and I think that's reflected in the nature of space-time, right? With the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, you can't know the position and momentum of a particle at any given time, right? And when we first discovered this through the double slit experiment and Schrodinger's cat and all these other quantum reality, when we found out in the 1920s that reality is really a probability wave and not exactly what it seems to be, right? The act of measuring changes things in a physical sense. That kind of blew all of our minds, but it's really reflected in the unknowability of all this other stuff, reflected in space-time itself. So if you're asking how do we not know when the end game is coming, we can have an idea of where the position and the momentum of a particle is, but we cannot know for sure ever. Just as we might have an idea of when we're going to die, but it could be tomorrow, it could be in 5 minutes, or it could be when we're 95. We do not know. We can estimate. That's the best that we can do.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Anything to add to that?
So I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question on this. The curve of the debt, the curve of the accrued debt, is that not an indicator of the coming imminence of the hyperinflationary event?
Yeah. It
So
could
can we
be.
not measure it based on that?
You're saying there's a definite curve that has an equation to it, some kind of
Yeah.
an
If we did a
exponential.
regression, like if you did a regression of the national debt and just extrapolated from there where it goes vertical, would
Mhm.
that suffice?
I don't think so.
Don't think so.
I think if someone could have done that, it would have been done already.
Yeah.
Or he would have been able to, and he would have been able to prove it from other monetary systems. The thing is, there might be a rough curve that it follows, but it doesn't go smoothly, right? There are moments of crisis where, for example, I think Daniel Oliver would put it that Federal Reserve assets or liabilities are way below what they need to be to sustain the curve, and so suddenly they're over here and they have to jump up and then keep there, and then there's another one and it just jumps up. So you don't really know exactly what curve you're on. You can draw it by points on the axis of crisis. But even then, it's not going to be exact. Like again, you can have a vague idea for what a woman's baby is going to be like if you know the nature of the parents, but you could also be wildly off, or you can estimate these
So,
things. You just can't know.
so how do you know you don't have another 10 years of the endgame investor in front of
I hate that question.
you?
Don't ask stupid questions.
Look, the simple answer is I don't know. I don't know. But I can track the relative insanity of people and cross check it or cross reference it with the growth of debt, and then cross reference that with past cycles and look into how society interacted with the monetary system in the past. And you can see all the signs of the absolute insanity of people, especially since 2020 when everybody just kind of lost it. And when that happened, I said like this has got to be the end stages. I don't know exactly how much time left, but any more time, and we're going to destroy this planet.
Yeah, I mean, I've been predicting the end game is imminent for a couple of years now, so and I still think it is imminent. I mean, I really do, and I've living my life according to an imminent end game. But could
Yeah,
we be wrong?
the broader point is once you get the logic, once you understand that we're not in any kind of a new era, that this has happened many times before, then if you're off, it's like the criticism doesn't really get to you much anymore. And like people celebrating about Bitcoin, $100,000. Well, good for you. Like, well, then why don't you just like cash out and go buy a bunch of stuff now? But nobody does that. It's because they're all hooked into the drug system.
Yeah.
But we know it's going to end. We know how it basically is going to end. We know that we're going to die. We know that the justice system is not perfect. We know all these things that are unknowable, but they happen eventually. It's going to happen with this too. And the criticism, oh, you've been wrong for so long, it doesn't really mean much because I still know
You're
what
not
we're
wrong. You're
doing.
just early.
You could say that. My
All
my
right.
my 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 job is not to get the timing perfect. It's to get people to understand that it's inevitable and you can work with it instead of work against it.
I like that. Yeah, that's pretty much what my channel is too. All right, third topic. We wanted to talk about the not the inevitability. It was the why sound money attracts alternative thinkers who often have some pretty wild ideas out there. And I
Yeah, there's
think
that
I'll
in the
start.
corollary question. There's that keep that in mind, but there's that in the corollary question. How do you differentiate between when the alternative thinkers are spot on and when they're just like on their own twirly madness that they've been on, which
Yeah.
happened to coincide with where the world was going for a while, but now they're spinning off in their own direction and the world is going off in a different one.
Yes, I so you probably get the same. I get emails from people telling me, not only is money sound, but the earth is flat and we don't really exist. We're all in a simulated, whatever. There's whole bunch of different ideas out there.
Right.
And they want me to, agree with these other ideas as well as the sound money ideas. And, I usually demur and say, well, we can agree on some things. So my question is, how do we know though that we are right on the sound money front? And because what we're doing is we're challenging the orthodoxy. We're saying the orthodoxy is wrong, and everyone in the Fed is wrong. Everyone on TV is wrong. Like we are really taking a position that a lot of very smart people and well-connected people and powerful people are in fact dead wrong.
Mhm.
So I can see why we look like a couple of absolute cranks to a normie.
Right.
So the question is, we believe these two things are true, or these things are true, and we are driven by our logic. And you and I can talk. We agree with each other. We can talk for hours and hours about why we're right, and we can explain to people why we're right. And a lot of people listen to us, and a lot of people agree with us. But how do we know that the orthodoxy is wrong on this specific front, but the orthodoxy is not wrong on, say, the Earth being a concave bowl and not a sphere?
Okay. So I'd say the first part of that question I think I can answer. The second part of it, how do we differentiate flat Earth? Um,
Or even just, or let me put it this way: how do you know when to challenge orthodoxy and when to agree with orthodoxy? There you go.
when the seeming orthodoxy is plainly immoral, then I will challenge it. Like clearly immoral. The idea of printing money and putting it into the economy is a clearly, obviously um, immoral position that you should not be able to manage an economy this way. There's nothing moral about it, and it is open theft. But if you go into orthodoxy is and you trace the development of orthodoxy. Long before the 1930s, 1920s, 1910s, right? Nobody believed that you can print money forever and just keep it going because that's just completely insane. So the orthodoxy before the Keynesians took over agreed with us, and there's plenty of evidence for that, and it's not like Austrian economics was a new thing so much as it was just a school that was able to express deductive logic in things that people already understood intuitively for many centuries beforehand. We're just the Austrian school just fleshed it out into it's what Hayek says. Like there's no discoveries to be made in economics. It's just humans interact with each other under certain principles, and we know what those principles are, even if for many centuries we could not articulate them. And then it took the Austrian school to say, you know what's been happening for these thousands of years? This. And that's why it makes sense. And then people are like, oh, you know what? Yeah, that's true. They're not saying to change it. And then the Keynesians come in and say, well, you know what we should do now that we never did before? We should do that. And then we're like, dude, that's not the orthodoxy. And then they get louder and louder and louder. And then we're like, it's not the orthodoxy. And then they just keep getting louder. And then we're like, you guys are all nuts. And then we look crazy. That's what happened there.
Okay, so the thing is, we are actually the secret orthodoxy. I
We
like
are
that.
the orthodoxy with flat Earth. Like, I don't care morally if the Earth is flat or it's round. It doesn't matter what it is. I don't think the Earth is flat because I see the evidence and I understand the evidence that the Earth is round. You're telling me that they're trying to trick me into thinking that the Earth is round because they have like these world domination plan. Like that doesn't. That sounds loopy. No, no, the Earth is round. Okay, just like calm down.
So one of our very early episodes, I made the bold proclamation that there are no anti-gravers. I said there's nobody who's anti-gravity. There's nobody who's like
Yeah.
gravity doesn't exist, right? Because it's a testable hypothesis. And
Mhm.
then on the comments of the YouTube, I don't know if they're trolling or not. There were people posting on the comments like, no, gravity's not real. It's not gravity. So, but there's still a force. Like you're not saying that you're not saying that you can float. And if you are saying you can float, I would love a demonstration of your floating.
Yeah.
Uh, so whether you call it gravity or something else, or whether you think it's not caused by the mass of the Earth, pulling us into the center of it at 9.8 meters per second squared, whether you think it's something else that's different, you still agree. I would think everyone in the comment, and maybe I'm about to get blasted in your comment sections again, but I would think everyone would agree there is something that is keeping us on the ground, whether the ground is flat or round.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't. Yeah, let me see. Okay, I guess that answered the question. I don't really have anything. I don't have any other further profundity to add to that because I think you answered it very well. That we actually are the secret orthodoxy. That our thoughts are what people thought was common. It was common sense in the 1800s.
Okay.
So there's really
Well,
nothing. The heresy is what happened in 1933.
mhm. Well, you can I can take another example from the Torah and go back to Abraham, right? He had this whole idea that there was actually just one God and there weren't many gods, and it was this whole new thing. And this is mostly in rabbinic literature. It's not explicit in the Torah itself, but the point with him was that he wasn't the first guy to think that to understand there was one God. Obviously, Adam, who was created in that same narrative by God, understood there was one God. God was talking to him. God talked to Cain. God talked to Noah. So they understand that there's one God, and then all of a sudden, like Abraham is considered the first monotheist in rabbinic tradition. Well, but he's not the first monotheist. The first monotheist was Adam because he was created by one God. So like, what are they saying? Well, it's the same principle. It wasn't that there was an orthodoxy and then Abraham's the first guy to subvert it. He was returning the world to theological reality as he understood it, and he was the only one who left who was the monotheist, and he was able to bring the world back to this monotheist idea, at least in this school of thought. So when you're trying to think about what the real orthodoxy is, you got to go back in time to not what all the jabbering idiots are saying now, but what have they been saying for hundreds and thousands of years in the past, and they might not have been 100% right all the time, but like there's a, there's like a sine wave, and the truth is somewhere in that sine wave, and all of a sudden we've like just gone over here, and we're not making any sense right now.
So it's Farber's orthodoxy regression theorem.
Okay.
There you go.
Ancient wisdom, ancient wisdom.
There you go. All right. Well, that's good. I think that's it.
Well, everybody tune into the Bitter Draft on Rumble.
Yeah.
It's also on YouTube, but Phil hates YouTube. And I'm going to start a rumor that I think that Phil is actually Matt Gaetz in disguise. And
He has better. He has a lot better hair than I do. So I'm putting if I'm Matt Gaetz, then I'm putting on a pretty nice toupee on top of me, on top of what I got left up here.
you could be you could be like a stunt double for him.
Take the incoming sniper fire. No, thank you. I do not want to physically resemble a politician right now in any way, shape, or form.